What up, peeps? Okay, I gotta get a quick plug in before this video. The first link in the description is my locals channel. Go there right away and sign up. We got a lot of moving pieces right now, and hopefully I'll be able to bring you some updates soon. Stuff you can't talk about on this platform, you know? And then hit the subscribe button here, too. All right, on to the YouTube approved news. Man, the last 2 days have been crazy. Let's talk about that whole mess. After all the emotion and those devastating images came out, what actually happened? Where do we stand? Well, to start off, and by far the most important, Biden crawls out of his hiding hole to give a nondescript speech written for him by his speechwriters because the political pressure was too much, then heads back to Camp David for his staycation without taking any questions from the press while still leaving thousands of journalists and American citizens in Afghanistan at the feet of the Taliban regime. And one of those journalists had this to say: all the intelligence facilities, documents, and infrastructures that contain sensitive material and equipment are now at the hands of the Taliban. Almost all military facilities, including aircrafts, are at the hands of the Taliban now. They were all donated by the US government. Whoa. Intelligence documents, facilities, and infrastructures seized? So the Taliban now has full access to highly sensitive material. If they got that, what else did they get?
Is the US taking any other sort of steps to prevent aircraft or other military equipment from falling into the hands of the Taliban?
I don't have information on your second part of the question, but we'll get back to them.
So there's no U.S. actions being taken to prevent equipment from falling into the hands of the Taliban by destroying it or anything else?
I don't have the answer to that question.
You don't have the answer.
Notice how the journalist trailed off at the very end there, trying to ask him for a third time if he was sure he didn't have anything? You don't have the answer to that question, General? Then, sir, with all due respect, what is all this? And this. And this. And this. From the Telegraph. Taliban fighters capture Black Hawk helicopters from U.S. base in Afghanistan. And this. Taliban forces sliding on a Soviet-era T-55 battle tank they took off the Afghan army. And this. Fighters seize $6 million U.S. Black Hawk helicopters alongside tons of American equipment, while taking to the skies and captured Russian choppers as advance approaches outskirts of Kabul. And General, do you know anything about this? Allegedly, the Taliban snatched this, a big bag, at the border crossing between Afghanistan and Iran. General, you don't have any information about all of that? No information? Just mind-boggling the amount of stuff that they got. And there were reports of Humvees and drones being confiscated as well. Jeez. What else happened? How about the refugees that Biden confirmed himself being imported to the U.S.?
We'll also continue to support the safe departure of civilian personnel, the civilian personnel of our allies who are still serving in Afghanistan. Operation Allies Refugee, which I announced back in July, has already moved 2,000 Afghans who are eligible for special immigration visas and their families to the United States.
And their families? Is this a portion of those refugees, Joe? Can you point out the women and children in there for me?
In the coming days, the U.S. military will provide assistance to move more SIV-eligible Afghans and their families out of Afghanistan.
How many more? We talking a couple hundred? Where are they going? Where's this nondescript number of people going? According to Jackie Heinrich, who's a congressional correspondent at Fox News Media, she reports that the Pentagon confirms to her that the Department of Defense is preparing to house thousands of Afghan refugees on American military installations, immediately, including Fort McCoy in Wisconsin and Fort Bliss in Texas. Wisconsin and Texas, you say? Now, those are interesting states. And this report from the Conservative Brief corroborates that, saying that the documents she obtained confirm that the Department of Defense is planning on relocating that many refugees into the United States. The document reads, quote, "The situation in Afghanistan may lead to DOS allowing Afghan SIV applicants to be moved to temporary housing locations while still being vetted for parole status." The Conservative Brief goes on to say Heinrich reported on Twitter that Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said, quote, "We want to have capacity to get up to several thousand immediately and want to be prepared for potential of tens of thousands." And is this group of people packed into a plane like sardines a part of that group as well, Joe? Because Jack Posobiec confirms, quote, "Pentagon confirms they plan to relocate up to 30,000 Afghan special immigrant visa applicants into the U.S." I mean, what is the ramifications of all this? What does this look like for us as citizens?
The people who made the Afghan occupation possible would like to see a lot more of our southern border, much more unrestrained immigration to the U.S. Bring in the refugees, they're screaming tonight. That's the only lesson they're taking from this debacle. Quote, "America must not stand idly by," Mitt Romney tweeted today. "The president must urgently rush to defend, rescue, and give and expand asylum. There is no time to spare."
Can it, Mittens?
So we're getting it. And if history is any guide, and it's always a guide, we will see many refugees from Afghanistan resettle in our country in coming months, probably in your neighborhood. And over the next decade, that number may swell to the millions. So first we invade and then we're invaded. It is always the same.
And after all that, after journalists and U.S. citizens being left behind in favor of relocating refugees, after the overwhelming alleged evidence of confiscation of arms that were being left behind for the Taliban to pick up, and after being confirmed by the Pentagon that thousands of refugees are trying to be relocated inside the United States, there's still one more massive thing that came out of this. They're selling this as though they're removing the troops, yet reinserting troops back in. Mike Pompeo tweeted out, sending more than 5,000 troops back in after you withdrew a couple thousand of them is proof that you are disconnected from the reality on the ground and aren't serious about protecting Americans. And you know when you've lost this next guy that you've really screwed things up.
President Biden keeps trying to change the subject from this inept withdrawal, which, just let's be frank here. If you withdraw 2,500 troops and then you have to send 6,000 back, that's not planned.
Right.
That's on its face an example of a failure.
The most trusted name in news, right? So bottom line, guys, why am I bringing you back-to-back stories on this? Because they thought bringing out the puppet in front of the cameras would get you to stop talking about it. And sadly, I hate to admit it, but sometimes they're right. We've been conditioned like sheep. Every time we're screaming from the mountaintops, all they have to do is set a new narrative and then we go away. The political pressure for Biden to come out was too strong. But they know that when they try to reset that narrative, 9 times out of 10, we'll go back to our just let me raise my family lifestyles. And ultimately, their point is to try to hide everything I just pointed out in the last few minutes. Biden would have stayed in his Camp David snuggie all day if he could have. But an 18-minute dismissive speech that he could just read off the teleprompter from his speechwriters is much more valuable to them than us being hot on their trail. Because they don't like hearing calls for impeachment or resignation. And they'll do or say anything to get that narrative back. Stay focused. Keep the blinders on. And then after everyone's been held accountable, don't lose sight of the big picture. Don't lose sight of the main focus, which I think should be coming out pretty soon.